Hello, and thank you for joining us in this episode of Birmingham Business TV. It's the International Women's Days edition, and we've got a loaded package for you today. Carl, what have we got?
We are here at the Unity Trust Bank in Brindley Place, and on this very set, very shortly, we're going to have a really power-packed panel to talk about lots of issues around International Women's Day, and I trust me, it's a fantastic panel we've got together. We've also, Davis, got a studio audience today.
Absolutely, we've got a studio audience. We're excited to talk to them and talk about all the issues surrounding International Women's Day. What else have we got on the show, Carl?
Well, we've got our 90 seconds with Hot Seat, as usual. We'll also be catching up with some of the team from the Unity Trust Bank here to give us a sneak peek about something we'll be finding out in more detail on next month's show. But also, our colleague Henry Carpenter is back at our usual base, the Liquid Media Centre in the heart of the city. Shall we find out who he's got in the hot seat?
Yeah, let's talk to him first.
Thank you. Hello. It gives me great pleasure to welcome John Angus to the studio here. And John is the Managing Director of Switch Hospitality. John, before we start to explore some of the key items of the day and issues you'd like to chat about, tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Switch.
Sure. So Switch Hospitality is a hotel management company. We run 4 hotels in Birmingham currently, main one being Park Regis, 253 rooms up at the top of Broad Street. We also have a private rental development and serviced offices as well. So we are pretty covered over Birmingham actually with regards to our actual residential hotels.
You've got other strings to your bow though, haven't you? You're involved in tourism in the region?
Yeah, I am currently chair of the Hospitality Association. I'm a board member actually of West Side Bid, and very much involved in developing the sort of West Midlands. I'm part of the actual large events group. So very much part of bringing actual tourism to see how we can help drive big events and tourism into the city.
So you've got a pretty good overview of the state of the hospitality and tourism sectors in the city. How are you feeling at the moment? Are you feeling in a good mood? Are you feeling optimistic?
I think Birmingham is in a positive place. I think that the last 12 months pre the Commonwealth was probably difficult because of the build up, the construction, the various things, the tram happening in the city. So there was lots of tentative actual positivity, if you call it that. I think the Commonwealth Games has been truly fantastic. It was a fantastic experience. Our hotels were completely full. Park Regis was an athletes' village, which was an amazing experience. So we had 250 athletes over 3 weeks. So our team got to interact with lots of different nationalities, and I and a few of my team got to go to touch a few of the events, and actually brought my family here on a Saturday just to experience Grand Central and actually all that area around there in the Bull, etc. So I think the whole experience has been fantastic, which has now given a major lift, and I think everyone in the city is now experiencing actually a positivity from that.
And when the games had finished, the city and the region was enveloped in a sort of a warm glow, wasn't it? And
yes.
Everyone was so positive. I think it's carried on, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, sort of hot to trot was pretty much the Conservative Party conference was in October, so only a few months after the games. So there was lots of events coming actually one after the other. And yes, positivity, tourism actually grew, but I think the Birmingham couldn't have had a better showcase, and I think it's been actually very positive. And I think the upcoming actual large events that are still coming in to the city will continue that trend.
I always think that hospitality and tourism, in a way, is a good bellwether as to the state of the economy. People have money in their pockets; they're happy to spend. So you're noticing that people are spending. People are wanting to go out and go and see the amazing places and eat in the amazing places of Birmingham.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that it has to be tinged with a note of caution, because I think that people understand value, and I think that I continually, with my hospitality hat on, try to preach to my colleagues in the city that you have to give quality service as well. I think if you don't provide a quality service, people understand that value. There is actually lots of competition out there. There are lots of cities. I've spoke to Manchester and actually to Liverpool fairly sort of recently, and they have, Manchester is actually struggling with a large influx actually of new properties coming in. Actually, Liverpool's got actually an occupancy drop. Two major cities that are trying to find ways to increase their actual tourism, whereas Birmingham is sitting right now with a positivity, but we have to give quality service, take care of our guests, create the environment, take care of our assets, all the basics of actually hotel management. But unfortunately, when the middle of the business is a bit squeezed, they're the things that people compromise on. So I think that people do want to spend, no question. I mean, the weekends are very, very busy. Corporate guests, conference guests is still very, very strong. But I keep on saying we have to give the actual quality service level.
There's a choice out there, isn't there?
100%.
Let's rewind about 5 years ago, pre-COVID. What, if you can think back that far, there's been a lot of water under the bridge since. How's it sitting at the moment, the hospitality in the city compared to as it was then? And this, I mean, bearing in mind we had the sort of Brexit issues and some of the skills, you know, some of the staff were leaving to go back to Eastern Europe and so forth.
Yeah.
Where are we now?
I think there's different sort of measurements. I think from a revenue stream, most hotels will be back at 2019 levels. I think from a profitability standpoint, that could be variable depending on the property. I think that one of the outputs of COVID is that costs have risen actually fairly substantially across actually most areas. So even though you may be taking the same income, you're probably not quite making the same profit. So, I mean, our businesses currently are having to generate 20% more income than pre-COVID just to get to the same profit levels.
There's also sort of a minimum wage factor to take in, isn't there? So.
Yeah, which from taking care of your team and making sure that your employees are getting paid sufficient to the actual rate of inflation and the cost of living. So yeah, I mean, in April, the wage goes up 9.64%, I believe. So might as well be 10%. But what happens in our industry is that when the actual minimum wage goes up, every other level has to go up too. So in our industry, probably most industries, payroll is the highest cost. So what we're saying is that payroll is going up by 10%. So we either have to become actually more efficient, which we generally are anyway, or we've got to find a way to pay for that.
There's a ripple effect, isn't
100%.
HS2. What's your mood about that? Are you optimistic? And what do you think it'll bring to the region?
I think to be fair, I think if you're not optimistic, then I'm not sure actually what you're reading, because ultimately the pain of getting there is probably similar in a small degree to the building of the tram. We were on Broad Street. We experienced 12 months of trying to build a tram and the impact that had on tourism and how the actual place looked. So the building and creation of HS2 is probably where the actual negative is. But the negative, I believe, is far outweighed by the positive. I mean, to get into London, is it something like 38, 40 minutes, something like that? It's just, it's going to open up actual links. And I think as well, we're experiencing in our actual residential piece, because we obviously do apartments as well as part actually of our structure, that there's lots of people who are now looking to move into the outskirts of Birmingham from the outskirts of London, because technically to get to London from places like Marlow, it's probably quicker to get there actually from Wolverhampton than Dudley.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably quicker to get. It'll be quicker to get to London from Birmingham than it will be to get from Greenwich to Euston, probably.
100%, and you can. I mean, I experienced that personally 20 years ago. We moved actually from London to the Cotswolds and got actually one more bedroom and saved money on the price. So ultimately, people can go from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom house and save money. So I think that the benefits to the city and in the infrastructure actually is going to be actually fantastic.
Are you sensing that people are keen to invest in Birmingham in a way they perhaps haven't been in the past?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it'd be interesting. I'm part of the Birmingham delegation that's going to MIPIM in Cannes next week. And that's an event that happens each year, which is all about attracting actually investment to the city. But I think, when we were at the pre-meeting actually with the mayor, Andy Street, the positivity that we can take to Cannes to talk to actually investors about all the things that we just talked about. The fact that it's a thriving city, HS2, the developments, the blue chip companies that have already moved here, the banking sector. But I think as well the National Pharmaceutical Centre as well that's starting to happen now, and the amount of those businesses that are actually moving in. I think there's a clear positivity, absolutely.
I've always thought actually that, I mean, we all know that Birmingham is probably guilty of being over modest, perhaps hiding its eyes under a bushel too much. I'm interested in what do outsiders, to use for want of a better term, what do they think of the place? And I think that the Commonwealth Games is, as it's placed in the sun, it shone a light on the city, and I think we all hope that the investment will follow.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was at the Pride of Britain Awards last night, which is a truly touching event. One of the Commonwealth volunteers was up on the stage and he said, I think we've proven to people that Birmingham's not that bad. And it's a shame that perhaps the actual perception was that Birmingham was bad, because it's not bad. And I think that the perception of the city, I mean, if you go around the city now, actually one of the negatives is the amount of construction work that's going on. But actually that's a positive, because ultimately when that's actually completed, and continues. I mean, there used to be an old adage when I was actually working in London, is the number of cranes would show you how positive the actual economy was in the city. And if you look at the Birmingham skyline and the number of cranes and number of developments and number of buildings that are being built, well, that tells you a positive actual story. I mean, it's not all actually plain sailing. There's no question about it. As we said before, we're all having to deal with increased costs. But in some cases, that's a fact of life, and you have to get on with it.
John, are there any items of news or any issues which have caught your eye in particular, which are particularly relevant to what you do and to our business community?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 or 3 stories in the press currently. I mean, obviously, one of the hot topics, I guess, is next week's budget. And obviously, there was quite a stark increase in corporation tax from 19 to 25%, and
Which looks like it's going to stay.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lobby to try to change that, but I don't think that will happen. But I think sometimes as well, what businesses have to do is take the positives as well. I mean, we've all benefited from a drop in our actual rateable value from the beginning of April. So the swings and roundabouts are there. Fine, okay, if you have to pay extra corporation tax, as long as you can see the value of the extra 5 or 6%. Then you have to get on with that. I think the other thing in the press that is pretty key is the whole conversation around actual migrant workers, and the threshold to be able to come and actually work in the UK has clearly been actually risen. So to get actually a work permit, there's certain actual qualifications, certain actual salary levels. And what that's done is that the core employees who perhaps were working in our industry and in our kitchens and our actual housekeeping departments from Eastern Europe and various other countries who actually left pre-Brexit, they don't have a route to come back. And clearly in our industry, that's a challenge. And you've probably seen lots of press about not being able to find enough staff. Well, in my opinion, if those employees were contributing to the economy, if those employees were paying tax, I'm not talking asylum seekers, I'm talking about quality actual employees from actually Eastern European countries. And if they were here before, I believe that they should be allowed to come back in, because the ones who stayed were actually allowed to stay. So I think for our industry to create a pathway to bring those employees back can be only beneficial on all sides.
Is there some lobbying going on?
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, UK hospitality are very much involved in that, and I think that there's a common sense. I think now it's about putting together a process. So I think the other thing that actually we're looking at, because of our actual construction arm and building arm, is that there appears to be growth. I mean, I think the Financial Times were talking about building is growing at its fastest rate. I think there's lots actually of general sort of legislation coming in on building now, and I think the variable costs are a challenge, but I think the overall positivity. So I think there's 2 or 3 things out there that are fairly sort of relevant. But again, you can spend a lot of time actually dwelling on the negative. I believe actually dwelling on the positive.
Do you think the workers' habits, the change in workers' habits, which have been fairly significant, and with there's talk of 4-day week being adopted more and more. Is that a good thing or bad thing for the hospitality industry?
I think it's probably an answer for an answer. I think it depends upon actually what you're doing. I think that flexibility is key. We are more focused on actual work-life balance. So for us, if an employee has a balanced home life and a happy home life, then they're going to be a much more balanced employee. So essentially, it's the beauty of actual hospitality is it can be on a case-by-case basis. But I think that because we are customer-facing, and we have to be actually consistent. So to say to, everybody who is a customer service actual agent, so whether that be actually reception or actually housekeeping or actually front office or the actual restaurant, you have to work every day and the people in the back office don't, we're not being actually consistent. So there's a consistency there, but there's no question about it. You have to have flexibility and you have to understand. I think it's more about understanding all of your employees as much as possible and then trying to be as flexible as possible.
Great. I'm coming to the end now. 5 years ago, I think everyone would say that Birmingham has moved on dramatically. 5 years' time, where do you see the city? Where do you see more hotels? Do you see more bars? Do you see more Michelin-starred restaurants? Where do you think is Birmingham going to be a new wonder destination, for want of a better term?
I'm not sure that it would get to the point of being a wonder destination, but I think what if you look at Manchester and actually Liverpool, as much as they're struggling a little bit, in our view, they've reached a precipice and they're starting to plateau. I think if you look at those actual developed city centres with the tram, with the bustling actual nightlife, with the structures around them, the difference in those cities is, for example, is that they have a multitude of what you call luxury 5-star actual hotels. Birmingham doesn't actually have that. And that's the difference. And then if you look at the number of actual Michelin star restaurants in those cities, and then in comparison to Birmingham, it doesn't have that. And the only reason it doesn't have that is because there's always been a belief that you wouldn't be able to charge the rate actually for those hotels. I believe we are busting that now, and there's a real demand. So when one 5-star or luxury property comes in, or one more Michelin star comes in and justifies itself, the rest actually will follow. So I suggest in 5 years' time, we will see an uplift in the quality actually of properties and the top end actually hotels. So your sort of Ritz-Carltons, your Sofotels, those type of hotels, your Kimptons that are in the other cities that aren't here, I think you'll start to see them actually arriving in Birmingham.
I think that's a pretty positive way to end. John, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Good to meet you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, welcome back to the Unity Trust Bank here at Brindley Place in Birmingham. This is the venue for our International Women's Day panel debate. And what a panel we've got for you. We've also got a studio audience here today as well. Give us a wave, give us a cheer, folks. Excellent, thank you. So Davis will be in the audience over the course of the afternoon as well, having a chat with a few of you as well. But let me introduce our panel first of all. On my immediate left, let me start. None of these people need introduction, but we're very polite here, so we're going to give them one anyway. Diane Benusi to my immediate left. Now, Diane, with her matrimonial law firm, Benusi & Co. in its 5th decade now, nationally respected divorce lawyer, also founder of business support organisation Birmingham Forward, which was set up in 1990. Next along, somebody I haven't interviewed probably for 6 or 7 years, maybe a few years more than that, which is Rosie Guinday. Now, Rosie's founder and CEO of social enterprise company Miss Macaroon, a bakery that takes on young people, training and mentoring them, and its products are stocked by high-end retailers like Selfridges. We'll get stuck into that. She's also been awarded an MBE for her work mentoring young people. Next along the line, somebody who appeared on one of our shows giving us her 90 seconds with views a few months ago is Nicola Fleet-Milne. Nicola, well known, founded for running her own property company. She's chair of Colmore Bid, helps to steer the district through the hugely disruptive years of COVID and lots more besides. And last but not least, the CEO of Unity Trust Bank here, Debbie Hazel, who's the host of us here today and sponsor indeed of the show. Now, Debbie's got an unparalleled international corporate experience in the region, having been based in New York, with various high-level banking roles. So I'm sure you'll agree we've got a fantastic panel, high-level and diverse panel for debate today. So let's get into our first question. And really, in fact, Diane, if it's all right, seeing as you're sitting next to me,
I don't have any option.
I'll throw this. Yeah, no, you don't have any option, actually. No. I just wonder whether you feel like an event like this and the conversations we are going to have today would or could have possibly happened when you first founded your business 30, 40 years ago. How different was the environment then for a woman in business?
I think the environment was different in everything, not just being a woman in business. But one of the things that I do remember, that not long after I'd set up my business, standing in the first floor, looking down on the street and seeing people queued in the traffic, and someone turning and looking at our brass plate, which was beautifully polished, and saying, "It's 2 women," as if we were aliens from a zoo or something like that. So I don't think you get that anymore.
Were you conscious of that right from the start when you were founding the business, though, or did it surprise
No, I think
you?
we were above it. We were just floating along, and if people said things or made jokes or anything like that, we didn't know about it. It was covert.
And was the legal profession in itself, when you were training, much like that? Were you
It was
were you a woman in a
dreadful.
man's world?
No,
Was it
no, I'm sorry. In saying we were above it, the reason I had the arrogance to set up a business when I'd only been a solicitor for 2 years was because I looked around me and couldn't believe the disgraceful conditions the officers were in. It was awful, absolutely awful. I said that the reception of the firm I was working in was worse than a DHSS waiting room. It was lino on the floor. It was just horrible, and there was no comfort, and the staff were in dreadful conditions. Nobody thought about things like that in those days, and we thought we could do better.
Rosie, what about you? I mean, from the time when you set up your business to now, how much has the climate changed in your world?
Yeah, we've been going for 12 years now. So there's been huge shifts and also not very much movement at all in lots of different ways. So this kind of forum is fantastic just to keep the conversation going. I guess it depends on which kind of bubble you're in. We run a social enterprise. Actually, it's pretty equitable, but it's a sector where people give a lot of time for free. It's quite caring. So, generally it's expected that it's 50-50 or roundabouts. And for me, as a social enterprise that works with a lot of corporates, it's about making sure, equity and inclusion really, permeates through those organisations as well. And within that time, you can definitely see there's been a shift in speaking and in action and in some great campaigns as well.
To the point now where actually you don't really want to be conscious that it's happening, you just want it to happen, to just be, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're pretty far off that. But we're not having the conversations about should we be doing it and what does it look like. It's actually, best practice implementation and real outcomes and long-lasting change and, intersectionality. So the what we're talking about is very different. I mean, I had a conversation probably only 3 or 4 years ago talking about should we be talking about equity and inclusion? And it's just like, come on, we finished that a long time ago. Why are we still having that conversation? So there have been real shifts.
Nicola, from your point of view, I mean, wearing, I guess, 2 different hats, your own business, but then also the bid. What's your sector like from the point of view? Do you relate to a lot of the things that these two have said here?
Well, it's interesting that Diane said that, 40 years ago, that was her experience, because Fleet Milne will be 19 on Sunday. And so 19 years ago, that was still my experience, was just a world in which I think people just were taking things for granted slightly. Work would just come to them because there wasn't much else by way of choice. So actually only a couple of years out of uni, and I decided to set up Fleet Milne. And it was much the same way. I wanted to create a really lovely, comfortable working environment. It wasn't just clients I wanted to look after. I wanted to look after my team just as much. And that wasn't something that I'd experienced. And as much as, we could go down the route of what I didn't like about things, I at least learnt what I didn't want to replicate. So I went into my own business knowing I wanted to spend a lot more time mentoring people, bringing women up the ranks. Over the years, you hear a lot of stories about, there used to be a scenario where a lot of women might get up to a certain point and kind of close off or pull up the ladder behind them. But that, I don't see that happening anymore. I see an awful lot more of putting down extra ladders and helping people to come up, because, you know, otherwise it gets very lonely. You want everyone to come up with you and where you can surpass you as well.
Although, yeah, of course, interestingly, all three of you have gone down the route of setting up your own business to actually make that happen, haven't you? Did you feel, was it a choice, or was it your only choice? Was it an option? Was there a crossroads moment? Was there?
We didn't have any choice.
Yeah, I don't think I think I had a burning desire to change the system, and I decided it wasn't going to happen by sitting on the sidelines. I had to kind of kick the door open, get in, and make it for myself. And of course, once you're making it for yourself, you can control what that looks like as well. So that works better than trying to tinker from the inside, you know, on your own.
And Debbie, I mean, in your sector, is it fair to say, you know, you are still female CEOs in your position are still in a significant minority, aren't they?
Very significant minority. And if you look at the numbers in finance, I was quite involved in gender balance in my old role in New York. It was around 20% of senior management was women. But that was a bit of a cheat, because they counted senior management as, you know, the 2 levels above me and the level below me. So if you cut it off at my level, it was probably single digits. So yeah, very, very, you know, small minority in senior roles.
Because you've obviously got experience at the top level on both sides of the Atlantic. How different is it in the UK to what you'd experienced in the US from that point of view?
It's about the same. It really is about the same. Yeah, it's an industry issue, and a lot of the organisations are global organisations, so it just carries over. So it's very similar in both jurisdictions.
But do you feel, you know, in the same way as the three of you all said, you know, you feel like progress, movement is there? Do you still encounter things that surprise you about how maybe backwards some thinking actually is?
I mean, I encountered loads of things. So it's not as bad as it was then. I mean, if you think about it, it's only 20 plus years ago that women were permitted to wear trousers in the workplace in banking. So let's just put some context there. There's a lot of things. Like when I walk in a room, nobody expects me to be in the role that I'm in. Nobody thinks, oh, there's the CEO, and I get the double take when I announce, you know, what my role is. And sometimes I don't announce because it's kind of more fun to let people find out. But I've had that throughout my career, whatever role I've been, whether I've been like portfolio manager, managing money, or in the lead roles, like the CEO roles I've been in. There's never an expectation that it would be me. And you know, you walk in a room with a group of people, and the customer or the client will go to the guy because they just assume that that's the most senior person. So you're constantly dealing with these like low expectations.
Can the three of you relate to that? Do you have similar experiences?
Yeah. I went to a meeting only 3 years ago, and there were 25 of us in the room, only 2 females, and we've all been waiting outside prior to going into the meeting. And one of the guys turned to me just before we went in, and he handed me his coffee cup and said, "Oh, I don't need this anymore. Do you want to get rid of that?" I said, "Well, I'm not staff. I'm actually part of the meeting." And he was so embarrassed. But it was half-half.
Yeah.
I was amused by it because I was amused at his embarrassment. But I was also devastated that was just his completely natural assumption.
Yeah.
So...
You've seen similar, have you, Diane, to that?
I think we've all experienced it, but I think we're insulated because we've got our own firms.
Yeah.
So if they don't know who we are, that's their problem, not ours. And I think that's a lot of the stuff we're talking about, is realising that what we think is our problem is their problem, because we're here.
And the people will throw back, oh, it's an unconscious bias. There's no, it wasn't done deliberately. You didn't realise. Can you relate to those kind of stories, Rosie?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, we all have biases. You know, we all have privileges. We all have, you know, positions that we come from that mean that we have to put in extra work to overcome them. And I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's just something that's within our continual professional development, and we're the only people that can really push ourselves forward. So some people need more work, some people need less work, and actually there'll be people who are 10 years younger than us, 15 years younger than than us that will be shocked by our attitudes and what we say. So, you know, we've all got work to do.
And other than sitting on a panel like this and talking to us, how do you try to use events like International Women's Day to take the conversation forward? What do you do? How useful do you feel it is?
I think it's incredibly useful. I think it's just a point to stop and reflect. I think, you know, there's lots of doors that are open, but they're selective doors. And, you know, with the glass ceiling, I think that's still there. And there are lots of people who are pushing through glass ceilings, but then they get to the next one and the next one, and you're not really sure kind of when that stops. You know, I think a lot of us are on different panels, different boards, different sector kind of bodies, and as soon as you step out of a particular bubble, you realise what the kind of constraints are, and you know, it's a constant thing. You have to keep pushing.
Yeah. And I think it's important you're saying that it's not just about what we think of others. We're also having to check ourselves. You know, and International Women's Day, although it is celebrated on one day of the year, you know, actually every day of the year, we should always be thinking about, actually, could I have phrased that better? Should I be thinking more carefully before I speak about that? Should I be promoting this positivity more? So there's always things that we can be doing every day.
There's that double-edged thing, isn't there, Debbie? I was talking to some people a couple of weeks ago about Apprenticeships Week, and the same conversation was, well, why are we only talking about championing how great apprenticeships are for 1 week in February? And you ask, well, why do you need a day like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, I totally agree. We should be thinking about it every day of the year. And actually, quite frankly, I think most of us women probably do, but it's the people that are not impacted don't. So if International Women's Day gets people, you know, gets men and thinking about, well, actually, that's their experience, or listening to the lived experience. And one of the things I tell a lot of the women all the time is actually not us. To your point, it's their problem, it's not us, but we're impacted by the problem. So in the environment where the work environment, the corporate environment, you know, there's so many programs on sort of women's leadership, the whole Fix the Women thing. Actually, what you need is the hiring managers, who are predominantly men, because there's only 10% women at the very senior levels. You need the hiring managers understanding that you've got to look into the organisation, you've got to recognise talent for talent, not recognise talent for the package that it's in. And if more people were to pick the women up and promote them at the same levels as men, because when you look at the numbers, that right from the beginning we hire, you know, sort of bigger organisations, sort of 50-50 men and women at the entry level, and then it just filters down till you get to the top levels, and it's 10%, as I say. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of excuses that put out there for that. You know, women self-select out for maternity, etc. Sure, there might be an element of that, but the real issue is that talent is not being recognised by the people that are promoting and the people that are paying, which is why there's, you know, gender pay gap. And that's an opportunity. International Women's Day is an opportunity for people to really think about, actually, what am I doing and what am I not doing, and what is my responsibility to try and balance things out.
It's also, as well, along that same line, important for the next generation of female entrepreneurs to have role models, to have people they can relate to, isn't it? To be able to say, well, yeah, I could do this because look what's being done. Did you feel, Diane, that there were people that you looked up to, or did you feel like you were trailblazing at the time? Was there anyone that, you know, you used as a motivation to say, yeah, I can do this?
I think I've been very lucky. I've had people in my life that have said one thing that I've remembered, and that's been very good at guiding me along. And I've had lots of people that have said things to me, like 2 senior partners in legal practices who said, Poppet, I'll never have a female partner. And I really am grateful to guide those 2 guys, because within 2 years of qualifying, I knew I'd got to do it myself and things like that. But can I just say, to take it to another level, I deal with people and their relationships all the time. And one of the things that I'm very aware of, that we're in a bubble, we've all made it, and we don't have any problem because we're all accepted for what we are. So we are shrink wrapped. But if you go into society and you actually look at how people conduct their lives, women's lives haven't changed in 40 years. Women still don't have the conduct of the finances of the family. Women still defer to their husbands. And I am absolutely shocked. There's a law about controlling, and now, but we don't use it very much. but that's something we've known about forever. So we're talking about our business community, but if women's lives when they get home are servile's very, very strong word, but if they are controlled at home or allow themselves to be controlled at home, then in a way, us talking about how we're going to bring them on in their jobs, they need to be brought on in their relationships. And that's taking it down to a sort of micro level of what women are actually experiencing. And the everyday tales, they're laughable, because you can't believe that the people that we meet are having such ghastly lives. And they're women, and they're suffering from being women. So it's a society problem.
And it's true, you can't be expected just to switch off one part of your life, switch on another, is it? So I know we're going to have lots more questions. That's a great scene setter. We'll take a quick break now, find out what Davis has got to tell us from the audience in just a minute. Don't go anywhere, we're back in a minute.
Are you looking to increase your clients, finance and networks? The Growth Hub can help you. Best of all, you don't have to pay for a single thing. We're a free service.
I could describe the Growth Hub in a few words, such as imperative, excellent and extremely helpful. I think any entrepreneur, any managing director would really benefit from using the Growth Hub to drive their business forward.
We have expert business advice. Our expert advisors have the tools to help you, whether you're a small or medium business. The people you'll speak to are experienced business people themselves, who can give you effective and analytical advice on your business firsthand.
Some of the support that we offer as a Growth Hub to SMEs, such as Rob's, can range from anything from access to finance, sales, marketing, and in particular an IP review in conjunction with the IPO.
From skills to business support and sustainability, no matter where you are on your entrepreneurial journey, we're here for you. Whatever your industry, whatever your sector, we find solutions for your business challenges. Grow your business and make it as successful as it can be. And all this for free. Make sure your business doesn't miss out. Visit our website for more information and to contact us.
We're excited to have an amazing studio audience filled with remarkable people, men and women, that are concerned about issues surrounding women. Now, I'm here with Denise Myers, and Denise is an expert in the recruitment space. She runs a diversity-led recruitment agency called Evenfield, and she's been in the space, working with different people and trying to help people advance in their careers. The question I've got for you, Denise, is when it comes to issues around women in the workplace, how far have we come, and what else is there to do?
Okay, well, we haven't come far enough. That's a fact. With regards to gender, the dial is moving, and we are seeing improvements, and we are seeing people rise through the ranks. But with respect of ethnicity and gender together, we haven't scratched the surface there yet.
And that's quite interesting because, you know, with all the conversations that we tend to have around International Women's Day and other days across the year, you would think that much is being done in terms of actually moving the needle and making change happen. What is it that you're seeing from the perspective of business owners and also from the perspective of the people being employed as well, in terms of what is being done and what is not being done?
Okay, so I think what is being done now, and this is probably since 2020, we are seeing the acknowledgements and people are talking about it more now. You know, and the Gen Z, the young generations coming through, they're not standing for any of it. So they are talking about it. So that I think that's good and that's positive. But I think the next thing is the action. Action needs to be taken, and organisations need to put some real strategies and plans in place of how they're going to tackle this, especially in cities like Birmingham and London, where, you know, the minority is now the majority.
Absolutely, and I think that is very important. You've touched on what the organizations need to do, but very quickly before we go back to the panel, talk to me about what individuals need to do themselves. So young women getting into the workforce and experiencing, you know, all those different type of discrimination or preconceived notions. What should they do in terms of how they carry themselves, mindset, actions that they could take, and all of that?
That's a really good question. I think that the first thing that they need to do is to try and work out how to overcome barriers and be aware of them and know that they are going to come, and how they're going to tackle that. They can do that by there's lots of reading out there that they can do, but there's also you know, they can get a coach. And they can ask advice from relatable role models. We've talked about that today, and I think that's really, really important. Find somebody who's made it or who is making it, and, you know, follow their lead.
And if the audience in the room and the panel is anything to go by, we have no shortage of role models. I'll take you back to Carl now as he continues to talk to the panel.
A quick thanks to Miss Macaroon for supplying us with the refreshments for the panel during the first commercial break. Thank you very much. And you've paced it nicely, so I can see another commercial break coming very soon. We're all right. Just Rosie, just picking up on one of the things Davis was saying there. Do you think Birmingham is set up as a city for, I say female entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs in general? Do you know how easy is it, and what, you know, are there holes in the portfolio, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's some fantastic entrepreneur accelerators out there, and there's lots of support. There's amazing role models. You know, we've got some really vibrant kind of support systems within business districts, within business improvement districts. I think there's definitely some holes in there, but you know, for the size of city that we are, we do have a huge amount of startups. I think 2 years ago we were the city outside of London that had the most new company startup. Obviously that's a proportion of those, probably not quite as many as should be, are set up by women or have women co-founders. So I think there's definitely a bit of a need for these kind of events to really get the message out there and to get out in the diverse communities as well. You know, we have incredible communities out there that actually setting up businesses, running up businesses in the blood, you know, is normal for within those cultures as well. So it's just kind of, you know, pulling that out and making sure that the right kind of support is there to make sure that, you know, that's not lost. As we say, you know, we want our kids to have better opportunities than we had, and actually, you know, making sure that we're not losing that entrepreneurial mindset when people are going into the kind of the professions that maybe pay a little bit more, actually that we kind of reinvest within those communities as well, I think is key.
If you were setting up your business now compared to 11 or 12 years ago when you did, would it be easier for you?
I don't know. I think that's quite difficult to tell. Obviously, you know, with the cost of living crisis, potential recession, going out of, you know, impacts of COVID, being a social enterprise, being a retail business, a manufacturing business, there's, you know, huge headwinds. I think I'd be terrified to set up a business now, to be honest. I set up Miss Macaroon with £500 of personal funds and grew it organically, took our first bit of investment in to set up our retail business within kind of 5 years. And I don't know that I'd have that same confidence right now.
And I mean, Nicola, with your wearing your Colmore bid hat, I mean, you're obviously exposed to the views of a lot of different kinds of businesses in the city. What's the sentiment like at the moment?
In terms of the entrepreneurship, it's an interesting one because the number of entrepreneurial firms that are in the Colmore Business District is probably a lot smaller than you would find across the whole city. So we're not as in contact with so many of those. In fact, Rosie actually sits on my board, and so she's the best person to ask. But I think to reflect on the question you kind of asked Rosie, I think that now I would find it easier to set up a new business, just in terms of the broad level and diverse kind of ways of supporting people. I mean, the day that I set up Fleet Mill, so much, looking back, so much wasn't done the way that it should have been done, didn't have the right support mechanisms, the mentoring side was much harder then. It wasn't not there, it just was a lot harder to find those things. But one thing that I think has always struck me about Birmingham is that I've always found it's a very willing city. Everybody wants to help, everybody's really happy. Introductions are just, they come from everywhere. And it's just actually really lovely. I'm not surprised that Birmingham is the second biggest, after London, but it's just a wonderful city to set up a business in. But there is so much more support now that I think the youngsters would be able to draw upon, so much more.
And Diane, when you set up Birmingham Forward in the early 1990s, was part of the motivation for that to fill some of these gaps that we're talking about here?
I didn't set up Birmingham Forward.
You're not fine?
No,
Okay.
Birmingham Forward morphed out of City 2000, which was the organisation that had been running in anticipation of the year 2000. And suddenly, when we got to it, they thought they ought to change the name because it wasn't appropriate anymore.
Right.
So I was chairman of Birmingham Forward. So
did the aims and objectives change at the same time as the title then at that point?
I hope we became a bit more feminised. It was very much a masculine organisation. I'm sure it's not now, but I remember going into the first board meeting and I was the only female there, and they were all back slapping and ho-ho-hoing, and I thought I'd gone along for a serious meeting, and they were all discussing what they'd been doing last night and with whom.
We better not follow that train of thought.
No. It was a bad life, and it was an embarrassing life because we were invisible, so they could talk about what they'd been doing, and we weren't supposed to even notice.
So do you can relate then presumably to what we were saying a bit earlier, that in that scenario it makes it very difficult to encourage other women to want to make the extra effort to break into and volunteer and come forward and sit on committees like that?
I think there's an expressed intention. For about 10 years I was on an RBS board, and that was about finance for women setting up businesses, and there were, I don't know why I was on it, but there were a lot of hard-hitting women on it. It was an amazing group of women, and we were talking and talking to the board about what they were doing wrong because they weren't supporting women. And to an extent I feel that women setting up a business, I know several women that will tell the tale that their husband wouldn't allow them to mortgage the house or put that as collateral because they didn't want to risk it. I'm sure the wife wouldn't have said to her husband, oh no, you can't do that to our house. But that does happen to women a lot. Well, it certainly was happening a lot in those days, and I imagine it still does, that women don't find it so easy to use the matrimonial assets because the husband won't agree to it. It makes it sound as if we're in the 19th century, and to an extent I think we need to realise it is still like that out there. We're all there, we're polished, we're okay, all up the ladder.
And I mean, Debbie, I was talking to some of your colleagues while we've been here today setting up for the show, and a lot of them have been very keen to talk about how important it is that a company looks after its staff and looks after, particularly whether it's the cost of living crisis, whether it's how they've handled COVID lockdown. It's very important to realise that different people from different sectors, different genders, are having different problems at different times, isn't it?
It is, and we try very hard to be inclusive, and it's up to the staff, to the team, to tell me whether we truly are. But we're a bank. We're focused on having a good bottom line, but we also we're a double bottom line with social impact bank. So you can't be out there lending and doing social good if you're not taking care of the people inside the organisation. So it is the thread that runs through everything that we do, and people that come to work for the bank are really focused on our mission as well. So we're very mindful of the fact that it's been hard for people with inflation rises, rent rises, mortgage going up. So we've done what we can as a bank to help them. We're very focused on policies. We've just changed our family policies from maternity and paternity to family, and we've increased the amount of time that people can take and how much they're paid during those times, because we can't expect people to give their full selves to us if we're not giving ourselves to them in their personal lives. And to your point earlier, how people are at home is really important to what they bring to the office. So if there's anything that we can do to create a better environment at home, then within the bounds of the operations, then we want to do that. We want to do that, and we get it back tenfold from the organisation. So we give, for example, 5 volunteer days to everybody so that they can go out and use their time to support the community, and people use it. And they really support the community. And within the bank, we have an organisation called Unity and Me, which has been set up by employees, which is about volunteering and is about the environment and take good care of health and well-being within the organisation. It's employee-led, and that's really important for the employees as well. So that's not me. That's everybody taking care of themselves and the people around them.
Do you think though as well, one of the things, maybe one of the positives, if you can call it that's come out of COVID is the fact that employers are now having to look at more flexible ways of running their companies. We're not all 9 to 5, we're not 5 days a week. And do you think that flexibility maybe breaks down some of the barriers sometimes for women to progress in the workplace?
Yeah, it does. So no longer, will somebody say, sorry, can I take Tuesday off because I've got to, have a doctor's appointment or whatever it is. It's just work from home and zip off for an hour. I don't care. And I'm really clear that it's about output. It's about, are you getting your job done? And I'm not, and nobody in the organisation is on people to say, do this. Everybody's very focused on what they want to achieve in their role. We obviously got targets, and we've got our strategy, and we've got our plan. And it's up to everybody to individually deliver to that. I don't mind where people are. It's nice when everybody's in the office. Like Tuesdays tend to be a big day, Wednesdays quite a big day as well. And there's a real buzz, and it's great satisfaction to get that buzz in the office because people are interacting with one another. Friday, pretty quiet day in the office, but that's completely fine because productivity doesn't go down. It's just people operating in a different way. So I'm so happy. It's unfortunate that we had to have COVID to do this. For years, where we brought video conferences in the systems in the bank, in my previous banks, like 20 years ago, and says, "Oh, we'll see our customers and we'll see our clients on video," and we'll. No, we don't. We still go out and see them, and we still insist that people come into the office. But it's completely feasible to run a strong business and do it with hybrid working, so that people can work out what's optimal for them.
And Nicola, are you conscious that maybe that's become more part of your role as an employer to make that work for people then, or? Yeah,
well, the industry that I'm in though is a fairly present industry. So actually during COVID we did a lot of online viewings, but our preference is for in person because we all know that when you meet a person, you see various sort of social cues in the way that people behave. You can tell if somebody's telling you the truth or not, that kind of stuff. So we have done a lot more by way of people, most of the team are in 5 days a week. Many of them by choice. Some of them, it's just the role that they fulfill. They can't do their viewings from home. There are a couple of people who it just works better for them not to have to come into the office, and it's all kind of on individual arrangement. So it's not a one size fits all, it's things being set up. But interestingly, from the bids perspective, we've obviously had a real challenge around that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So there's been an impact for our hospitality and leisure in terms of which days of the week are busier. So, in the olden days, it was Thursday nights and Fridays were really busy. That's all shifted slightly. The offices are busier Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But interestingly, it's not like there's a total shutdown. Mondays are not completely dead. Fridays are not completely dead. And the evenings are not. There's the Cornwall bid has become almost two sides of a coin here. So you have the workers during the day for the offices, but actually there's so much hospitality and leisure now that the evenings, it's also a lot busier than it ever was before because a lot of people are coming into town just just to come out. You know, people want to leave their homes, especially if you've been working all day from home.
Yeah.
You want to get out, go and do something. There's theatres, there's, you know, bars, restaurants, etc. So it's an interesting one, because I don't think that debate will go away for a very long time, like the impact on the you know, the office sort of vibe.
But it's great to hear, because it means that people can mix and match a job role that suits their own personal circumstances, doesn't it? from
Yeah,
that point of view?
absolutely. And I suppose it's a little bit of a so Fleet Milne is predominantly females, actually, and I've made apologies for that in the past, and I really wish I hadn't, because I don't apologise. I find that you know, I attract more females into my business, you know, and that's just kind of the way that it is. There are guys that work there, you know, and they're very well looked after, just the same as the girls, but there are more females, and it means that the firm operates in a way that is more understanding, I think, of the female challenges that they have. So when I referred to somebody who's, you know, working from home a little bit more, well, I have somebody who's single parent family with 3 kids, and I'm not going to insist that she comes into the office because that suits me. I need to find out. She's brilliant. She does her job brilliantly, and she's really part of the team. And interestingly, we kind of offered, look, do you want to just permanently work from home? And she said, oh no. I do need time away from those children. But she wants to be able to come into the office and see people and go for a drink after work and still be part of the team and the office vibe. But interestingly, that the guys don't have perhaps the same pressures on their times. They're not expected to be at home. I mean, to be fair to them, none of them is a single parent with 3 kids. So, and if they were, we'd be having a different conversation if that suited them better.
And that's where the flexibility, you know, really
yes,
fits in,
that's
doesn't
where
it?
it really is quite handy.
Hold that thought. It's time for another macaroon commercial break. So, we'll be back in a couple of minutes. We're going to catch out some news headlines, which Henry's going to bring you right now, and then we'll be back to find out who Davis has caught up with in the audience. See you in a minute.
Royal Sutton Coldfield Bid is enlisting the help of Queen of Shops, Mary Porters, to address local businesses at a seminar in the town centre this June. Bid bosses are hoping that the businesswoman, broadcaster and high streets guru will help invigorate the heart of the town. A new drive to create international trade opportunities for businesses was announced at the Chamber's Global Trade Conference. From April the 1st, the Greater Birmingham Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce will evolve into the Greater Birmingham Global Chamber of Commerce to provide opportunities for Chamber members in more international markets. Law firm Shakespeare Martineau has added to its Birmingham-based banking team with a trio of hires: Associate Mariam Mansour, Legal Executive Noreen Khan Ghalib, and Paralegal Tina Seymar.
Back to fabulous people in the audience, and I'm going to be talking to Iman El Alawi. We came to the UK when you were 13, correct? And you are the co-founder of Entech SI, and I want you to touch on something that the panel was talking about earlier, the issue of unconscious biases, because in the business world today we have, you know, preconceived notions and things of that nature. From your experience, what are the things that you've seen in terms of unconscious biases that people tend to bring into the workplace or into business conversations?
It's really interesting listening to the panelists earlier, and I've really, everything they've said resonates with me personally. Entech SI is a business that's been made up by 2 people, one male, one female, me, and we always struggled, even up to 5 years ago, walking into a business meeting, if the 2 of us were in that meeting. Obviously, there's me, female, and with a slightly unusual name. They always deferred to my business partner, Peter. And it takes so much effort to be able to work within that environment to get them to a point where they actually can defer to you and understand that you are an equal partner in that. But I see that not just in the business world, I see it in the personal situations as well. So I fly fixed-wing aircraft. It's something I took up as a hobby 5 years ago again. And every time I land at an airport, if there's a male partner with me in that particular scenario, you go to pay the landing fee they defer to him and they think he's the pilot. So you see it on a personal level, and also you see it at a very business level.
So it's not just in the world of business, it's a societal thing, you think?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think it just feels, and again, the panelists said it earlier, it feels that you have to work extra hard and you have to prove yourself again and again, both at a personal level and equally at a business level.
And what are those things that you think we need to begin to do about it? What actions can we take?
I think there's quite a lot we can do. As business leaders and business owners, we can do more, I feel. For instance, in NTech SI, we are 62% female. So that's not a conscious decision, but it is only because finding the right people to do the job, that seems to be the case. And we have been for quite some time. I think us CEOs, we have to work a little bit harder and be more mindful in terms of helping people along that journey. But equally, I think we as business leaders, again, we can mentor. I think that was discussed a few times. And I think we're in a great position to be role models and to work with people who can be role models for those who are aspiring to work, particularly in our sector as well, because we're very much in the tech sector. So that tends to be a little bit more challenging for females as well. And the other thing I think we can do, and we can all do that, is to call it out and be upfront about it and stand there and say, excuse me, I am who I am, or I am the person who flew that aircraft in. And I think until we do that, that's always going to be a challenge. Quite often we find a lot of people, once you call it out, they stand there and go, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't realise. So it's just calling it out that needs to be done more, I feel.
I totally agree with you, because I think that there's some excellent work being done by amazing women all over the place, and it's just not being recognized enough. So thank you very much for drawing attention to that. We're going to go back to the panel now, where Carl is eagerly waiting to talk to our fantastic panel.
Thanks very much, Davis. Yes, I am indeed eagerly waiting. Got lots more questions to try and get through before the end of the show. Rosie, coming to you from this one, and maybe this follows on very interestingly from here about the issue of role models and whether you have someone to aspire to. I know you do quite a lot of mentoring work, don't you, and working with with young people to help them through. Are you conscious that one of the things you really need to do when you're working with them is be their role model, or point them in the direction of role models for them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of the Macaroons That Make a Difference training course is having inspirational speakers. And it's really important for those inspirational speakers to be from diverse backgrounds, and for some of them to have been in their position only 6 months, a year before, because actually they are incredibly inspiring. They might not have had a job before, and they've got their first job, and they've overcome loads of barriers. So really being able to hone in on everybody's strengths and give, equally value those. I think that's really important to do, so that actually they can feel like they can quite quickly become those role models as well. For me, it's really important to provide leadership opportunities for young people as well. So some of the graduates of the programme created their own programme called Maximad Leaders, where they get skilled up. They do safeguarding training, mental health first aid training, presentation skills. They get lots of counselling as well. And they go out and promote our programme. They go support trainees and potential trainees. They actually advise our board on how they should spend the profits to support other young people. And it's amazing that they have developed that programme from a blank piece of paper with a little bit of facilitation support from one of our special advisors. And it's
how
just
rewarding is that?
It's incredible. It's incredible for them to be able to move into that leadership position very quickly, and for that to open doors for them, be on national ad campaigns and speak to CEOs and partners of huge kind of professional services firms. I think that's what we can do. I think, when I sit on different panels, I always try and push the fact that actually I'm really fortunate to be in my situation, and I learn loads from every single opportunity that I am able to take part in. But actually we can all open the door just by bringing in a junior team member. Every single meeting we go to, every single board we sit on, being able to bring a junior person so that they can see what kind of conversations happen, and they can see that it's not always that scary, and just trying to set up youth boards and youth committees or, you know, advisory groups, just to enable people to have those kind of conversations and just get more confident in those areas is really important, because they are the mentors, they are the, you know, inspirational people for not even tomorrow, for today.
And Diane, how conscious are you, have you been over the years, that you are needing to be or are being a role model to, you know, other people that aspire to do what you've done?
I don't think I've ever thought about it. I think we just, if you're busy, you don't think about what you're doing. You just think about doing it, don't you? And I think I've been very busy and not had time to step back. In fact, the only time I stepped back was when I'd got to do a speech recently, and I just stopped, and I was lying in bed actually thinking, instead of getting out of bed, making my bed, getting on with the day, I actually decided I'd lie in bed for a few minutes, and I'd got to prepare a document and a speech. And I lay there thinking about it, and I was thinking, what can I say? And I was sort of going back over things. None of us have got time for that. We haven't got time to think, am I a role model? Am I this? Am I? You're just being. Well, you're not being a human being a human doing. We haven't got time to be a being, because that's static. And so, no, I'm not a role model. I'm just doing what I'm doing. And if someone follows and thinks it's worth copying, or that's good, but I'm not a teacher. I'm a person.
Debbie, I could see you nodding to some of the things Diane was saying there. Do you feel, is there extra pressure maybe because of the job you've got, that you feel you need to be an extra mentor or role model to people?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would definitely not call it pressure, but I was just sort of nodding to what you were saying about sort of not really being aware. So I think probably the first 20 years of my career, I was completely oblivious to that, completely oblivious. And the switch went on when I took my second leadership role, and the way that I was greeted by a lot of women in the organisation, they made a point of coming out to find me because, like, we got a female CEO, and oh, good for you. I'm like, wow, actually that's pretty special, and I hadn't really thought about that at all that way. And then seeing that reaction made me realise I actually do have a real responsibility here. So whether I choose to be a role model or not, I'm being perceived in that way by a certain level of the population. Very interesting, of course, it's the women that are so happy to see a female CEO. And that led me to do a lot more gender work in the organisation, and, you know, and I won't say I mentor women, but I'm always there. I make myself available if people want to ask questions. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of, I'm going different pathway here, but I'm not a huge fan of like formal mentoring conversations. I think they're a little bit false. But if I make myself available, so if anybody's got an issue that they want to talk about or bounce something off me, my door will always be open. And I find when you put yourself out there like that, a lot of people take you up on it. And actually, particularly now, I'm seeing a lot of my contacts over the years reaching out, you know, have lost their jobs, made redundant and so forth, asking for contacts and help and resume. Absolutely happy to do that, because women have got to help women because other people don't.
Do you think some of those requests that you're getting maybe would have, if it was a few years ago, they wouldn't have felt able to do that, do you think, or not?
I think it's more about how you position yourself. I mean, I always say I have an open door policy, literally and figuratively. I think it's how you position yourselves. And one of the things I'm very clear on is, you know, there's the role that I do, and then there's who I am. And I also think that, you know, given that a lot of men have been like bank CEOs in the past, very few women, then it's been positioned as this really important job, and it's really hard and really difficult. And it's not, actually. That's this little secret.
You're not supposed to tell people.
Yeah, I know I'm not supposed, but it's, you know, so we're all doing a job. My job happens to be, you know, a different job from other people's job. So when you make yourself accessible and sort of don't put yourself in the ivory tower, then it enables people to feel more comfortable to have those conversations with you.
I mean, Nicola, from your point of view, by the sound of it, you've got no shortage of potential female role models in your organisation, have you?
So. I've got the same sort of position as you, actually, that I've always found official mentoring, I find it a little bit difficult, because I'm a real solutionizer, and if someone tells me a problem, I immediately go into, right, how can we actually fix this? And that's not really what mentoring is about. You know, it's supposed to be a lot more kind of asking questions than finding the solution. But, you know, I still sign up for it. and I still take part on the basis that it's my way of being, it's kind of my way of being available. So my team at work know that I'm available. Anybody who knows me knows that you just have to ask, and yeah, of course I've got time. I'll always make time. But I do think that the mentoring sort of scenario is incredibly important, because sometimes until you're in that arena, you don't know who's available, or you don't always believe that they're available because you're not there yet. And sometimes the mentoring sort of process will bring you into that arena, and then once you're there, you know, the world opens up to you, really. So I have actually got a new mentee recently, and I had to warn her because she did say to me at the beginning of one of our chats, you know, I'm not massively happy in the role that I'm in. I was like, look, I just need you to know the last 3 people I've mentored left their jobs. So, you know, you could be the 4th. This is a real possibility. But partly because a lot of the time they'll open up, because I've always had female mentees, people open up and tell you the stuff that they haven't felt they could tell somebody at work. And the amount of toxicity in some firms is genuinely shocking. And my solutionising is get out of that toxic environment, because actually the world is not all toxic. There are lots of wonderful firms. It sounds like your firm is a wonderful place to work. You want people to find their role and their place and be happy about it. I mean, who wants to go to work dreading it? Not me. So, you know, I do whatever I can with that, but I'm like, I just need you to know this is kind of how I operate. So,
do you think that women take it on the chin far more, so that the thing that they're describing is to us, we're listening to it thinking, oh my God, you're not putting up with that.
Yeah.
But we're actually holding up a mirror to them, because half the time they've just taken it. And when you say that's absolutely unacceptable, they go, really? Do you think it's unacceptable?
Well,
and
this
it's
is young
shocking.
people as well, who maybe haven't yet realised that they've just assumed that that's it. You know how it is. You've got people in your team and this is their first job, so they don't know any different. Sometimes people leave your firm and then they look back and say, oh wow, that was actually a really lovely environment to work in. I assumed all jobs were like that because it was my first job. And in this particular case, it's her first job, but in a toxic environment. So her assumption is everywhere's toxic. And I'm busy saying, I mean, the mirror to her was my face going, wow, I would not work around these people. I absolutely wouldn't. But it still has to be her choice to make that move. So.
But of course, if companies don't really want to change the status quo, and going back to what you were saying earlier, that perhaps historically, if decision makers are all men and they want to keep it that way, it's in their interest to foster that kind of belief, isn't it? Sometimes, and that slows down the evolution, doesn't it? Do you think?
I don't think the men know. I don't think they know how toxic they are, frankly.
We're not half as clever as you think we are, actually.
If you were half as clever as I think you are, you'd be really dim. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Do you know what? I love a panel that speaks their mind. This is excellent. I'm doing this without an auto-cue.
No, what I was saying was they really have got a toxic environment. The guy at the top is an absolute so-and-so. The others are his acolytes and going around learning how to do it really effectively. And they just don't understand because they're insulated and they don't understand how unhappy they make people.
But it's not in their interest to do anything about that insulation, is it? That's the thing.
Well, I had 4 mentors that changed jobs. Before you started saying that, I was thinking that's why I stopped mentoring, because 4 people changed their jobs, did something entirely different. I was sitting there thinking, what am I doing wrong? I've decided I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do, be an airline pilot or something like that instead of a teacher.
We'll be back for our 4th and final section of the debate here from Unity Trust Bank in a couple of minutes. Back to the studio now for some more news headlines from Henry, and then I'll see if Diane and I can make up in the break.
I'm sorry.
The Manufacturing Technology Centre is hosting a 2-day conference in May, which is looking to encourage UK manufacturing firms to increase their use of robotics and automation. The event at the MTC on May the 10th and 11th will explore the future of automation in UK industry and demonstrate the opportunities available throughout the UK. Two West Midlands recruitment organisations have announced a joint venture aiming to create the region's largest logistics jobs firm by 2028. Workforce solutions specialist, the Gerald Group, has finalised a partnership with logistics recruitment firm TempSource with the aim of offering hundreds of permanent and temporary roles. EY has strengthened its private team in the Midlands with the appointment of new director Anisha Patel. Anisha, who has more than 8 years' experience working in mergers and acquisitions and growth capital markets, will work with new and existing clients in the privately owned business market.
I'm now going to be chatting with Fidelis Navis, who is the Community Director of Warwickshire County Cricket Club. And you've been in the charity industry for more than 20 years?
Not quite more than 20, thank you. But
Okay.
yeah.
So that was close. That was close. Now, the charity sector is quite an interesting one. And now that we're talking about issues around International Women's Day and challenges that women face in the world of business, are there any issues and challenges that are peculiar to women in the charity sector?
I think that you could say that the charity sector is predominantly female, and therefore you might say within this arena, well, if we're all female, we're all up for each other, we're all supporting each other, we're all there to help and guide and all the things we've been talking about today about mentoring. But subsequently, I've seen, sadly, moments where we've not done that over the years, but also that means that if you look at the top jobs, there's often too many men, in my opinion, insofar as if you really want to be a leader within the charity sector, you tend to be male. That's definitely changing, but that would be an issue. As a woman in the charity sector, we tend to be in the lower jobs.
And that's quite interesting because when it comes to conversations around women in business, sometimes one of the things that come up is there's some sectors that are more suited to women and some sectors that are more suited to men. Is that something we've made up in our minds?
Yes, absolutely terrible. I totally dispute that fact. To be within the charity sector, you need to be as hard as nails with a very strong heart. And you might say that you need that within every sector, but the charity sector is not for the weak, for sure. Yeah, if that's what you're implying by being a female, maybe that's my assumption that you've just made, but no.
And you touched on something earlier about in the roles in the charity sector being predominantly female when it comes to the lower end of the roles, and then when you get to the higher up and the C-suite, you get to find a lot of males. Why do you think that has been the case?
Maternity leave, gender pay gap. So it's not exclusively. Things are definitely changing. I think that the charity sector is certainly, thanks to COVID, seen the benefits of being flexible working. But ultimately, it's the penalty for becoming a mother, subsequently not seeing, you cannot be who you cannot see. I think it's sadly those reasons, but it is changing. I'm not going to sit here and say, I can certainly tell you, give you the names of some really powerful, impactful charity leaders, but we've still got a bit to go.
And if there are specific things that you like to change immediately, assume you've got a magic wand, what would those things be?
For every organisation to understand the benefits of flexible working, and that doesn't mean just because you're a woman and a mother, for everybody, because actually ultimately we all need to have an equal workplace so that everybody benefits. So you're not sat here thinking, well, she gets this and I don't get it because of the difference between you and I. It's for everybody to have that flexibility. That would be a magic wand for me.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect place to put it, because when we've got a workplace where everyone feels at home, then we have workplaces that really work for every single person. We'll get back to the panel now. Carl, over to you.
Thanks very much, Davis. Yeah, one final visit to our panel now before we wrap up the debate. I've got so many questions. I'll try and get through as many as I possibly can. I want to end, so I'll give you a little bit of thinking time on this one, by asking you on this International Women's Day, if you've got a shopping list of things that you would like to be achieved, what would be on them? So stew on that one, park that thought for a moment. But first of all, I just wanted really to maybe come to Debbie, because you touched about the gender pay gap there, and you mentioned earlier about how important it is. Equality on all kind of levels has got to be achieved if we're going to take this debate sensibly forward. Where are we at on that, do you think, in your sector?
I mean, I think just to be really clear about the distinction between gender pay equity and gender pay gap. So gender pay equity is two people getting paid the same for doing the same job, and gender pay gap is the all of the men and the women in the organisation versus all of the women in the organisation. So gender pay gap tends to be large because there's more women at the junior level and more men at the senior level. And until we get more women at senior levels, then there will always be a gender pay gap. So it doesn't in my industry, you know, and I talk about the industry as a whole as opposed to the bank here, because I think that we're making great inroads at the bank. As an industry, it's really not changing very much at all. It's really not changing, and you'll only really see the change when you bring in more women at the top, because as I say, at the bottom, it tends to be sort of 50-50 on the intake, and then just women fall at the wayside. And some of it's maternity, but as I said before, a lot of it is just that women's talent is not recognised, and women are not promoted at the same level as men. There's some statistics out there. I think that on average, that in the entry-level role, women get promoted 18 months after men get promoted. So it starts right there, and it continues through the career. And when you look at at the senior levels of the organisation, a 50-year-old woman going up for a partner role, that's not, and she doesn't get it, it's nothing to do with maternity leave. It's all about how people perceive what's required of a partner. And there's a lot of confluence between looking at what are leadership characteristics and what are male characteristics. And because men have been so many of the leaders in the past, then there's a view that you need to have these male characteristics in order to be a leader. And I think one of the things that I try and do, and others in my realm, is to show that you can actually be a very different type of leader. You don't have to be the leader that have the characteristics of leader past. You can be warm, you can care about people. These are not, I mean, other terminology I hate, soft skills. It's not soft, it's actually called leadership. And I think that women have a lot of skills that they can bring to leadership that are just not recognised as such.
Do you think, Diane, you felt you've maybe had to prove yourself more throughout your career, to do what, maybe men would have found a door opening more easily for them?
I think so. I think that, well, I had my first child in the middle of the Christmas vacation in my law degree and didn't miss a day. And I don't think if man had to go into hospital, have surgery, he wouldn't have come in carrying the baby in the Moses basket, would he? So yes, you had to go the extra mile because, well, that's the only way it could be. You just got to get on and do it. There's no one to pick up after you. You've got to do it. You've got to be carrying your own load. So yes, you have got to be tougher, more resilient, and harder in a way. You've got to be harder with yourself, certainly.
Do you feel that, Rosie, you've had to sort of build a hard shell? Maybe you had it already right from day one, but do you feel you've had to build and appreciate that you need it?
Yeah, I think I cut off from a lot of things. So I think, years gone by, I've probably said it hasn't affected me. And then I've been put in certain situations over the past couple of years where I've actually there's no way that I can ignore the systemic injustices happening around me. And, I think I've been quite blinkered in a self-preservation mode. And actually it's everywhere. It is everywhere. And I think, sometimes we continue and we exacerbate those situations. I think when we move into those positions, some of those constructs are visible and others aren't. And by not opening the door for younger people, then we're continuing to maintain those constructs and keep people out. And I think, there are still those constructs there. The doors, I get invitations to sit on boards and be the only kind of woman or woman of colour, or I get to speak on panels and it's a similar kind of thing. And actually, it's great to be visible, but you can see sometimes where it's in an organisation where it's the tick box exercise, and actually you have to get your foot in the door to be able to create that real change, but it's so incredibly exhausting. And, it's not when you're just there as well. A lot of the change happens within, outside of those roles. And I think as women, we don't necessarily have those private members clubs, or we don't, for me anyway, I don't spend as much time as my partner does at breakfast meetings and dinners and things like that, developing those informal networks to a level where they're actually going to create those changes. And it's a full-time job in itself, and it's a mindset shift that actually we probably need to kind of pull into the limelight. I think we're part of a female entrepreneurs network that's a great network, and within that network there's kind of a group of women who operate at that kind of level, because they do open doors for each other, and they're their own champions, and they champion each other, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think we just need to embed that more across all of the different kind of industries and sectors, and just be open and honest about it, because it still does happen. It happens with men, and I think we just need to say, actually, let's make sure that we've got that for women as well, and actually male allies out there to make sure that the doors are opening for women as well, and for younger people.
Nicola, what's the situation on Colmore Bid? Have you got quite a good level of female representation now on the board then?
Yeah, so when I became chair in January 2020, we didn't, in my opinion, have enough females on our board. There wasn't enough of a mix. And so I basically just took the whole board through a process of, we reduced the number of people on the board in the first place, but we also dramatically increased representation. So that's not just gender, that was across all sorts of things, including age as well, because we were increasingly getting older. So I wanted to make sure that was done. But interestingly, when we went out for recruitment, we made our lives, I think, better but also tougher by making the process a blind process to get through to interview. So I literally put on LinkedIn, if you look at the board right now and you do not see yourself, please apply. I want people to apply if they can't see themselves for that very reason, because if we're always not applying because you don't see yourself there, then that's not going to help. It's kind of part of the system. It's not to say that that's where it started, but it's a perpetuation of the same issues. And actually, it was really lovely. We had really great breadth of people who applied, and now we are 11 private board members. We are 6 men and 5 women, so we're almost there. And because I actually do want to see if we can get it sort of a little bit the other way around, but that's not an easy thing to do. I'm going to slightly steal your next question, because you asked us to think about kind of our wish list or our magic wand. And I know there was a lot of debate years ago about the idea of having quotas of, the number of women that should be on boards and things like that. And there was a lot of fierce debate about, look, we don't want to just be in the room because we're part of a quota system, because we're worried that, then you just end up with not very good people on boards. Well, we've had that for years. We've had plenty of not very good people on boards. That doesn't matter whether you're male or female if you're not very good. But I would like to see more pressure, and if that is quotas, to start the whole thing off, because nothing's perfect and you've got to start somewhere, and you can finesse it as you go. And I'd love to see that requirement that you've got to have more breadth across your board. How can you possibly be looking at a firm or a charity or whatever the entity is, whatever the organisation, and think that you've got a really good view on how the whole thing works if everything's looking through one single lens? It's just, that would be my magic wand, I think.
You'd hope, wouldn't you, if it was a proper level playing field, that across most sectors you'd end up with a broad 50-50 representation, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Everywhere down the line. Okay, so you've started us off then, Nicola, already. Diane, from your point of view, if you've got a wish list of something that you hope might come from debates like this, or that International Women's Day might trigger, what would it be? Is there a couple of things?
That we carry on thinking about it throughout the year, and that it isn't just a one-day thing, and that we develop a sensitivity and spot things so that other people aren't being put in, women particularly aren't in uncomfortable situations because men are carrying on like they always do. We need to actually recognise when people are in trouble and support them quietly.
Rosie?
I think spotlighting, really good practice, and that's within the home as well. So, you know, making sure that we're not putting up with anything less than 50% of the caregiving activities or the housework, and just to make sure that actually, you know, it is equal and we do get that extra time to have me time and take care of yourself and your own mental health as well, to be able to put back into all of the good stuff that we do in our business life.
Excellent. And I feel I should give our host today the last word. So Debbie, round us off.
Gosh. So I would hope that we could try and put ourselves in other people's shoes. So we've talked a lot about how people don't know that their behaviours might be toxic to women because it's just how people have always worked in the workplace. You know, I don't know what it feels like to be a minority woman in the workplace, but the more I hear about some of the experiences, it makes me, you know, it's an eye-opener for me. So I think if we can get more men understanding what women's experiences are, and other people empathise with where other people are, I think that would be a big step towards understanding what needs to happen in order to get a more even playing field.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for your contributions. Can we say a big thank you to the members of our panel? Folks, thank you very much indeed. Thanks also to Davis and members of the audience. I hope you found plenty of food for thought there. And finally, of course, big thanks to Unity Bank here for hosting us today. Thank you very much. So before we leave Unity Trust Bank today, just wanted to have a quick catch up with two people that we'll be hearing a lot more from actually on next month's show. We've got Josh and we've got Penny here. Just explain a little bit about who you are and your roles with the organisation.
Yep, so my name is Penny Hogan. I'm the financial controller here at Unity Trust Bank. So involved in all things financial, including the year-end accounts, the annual report and accounts.
I find that's quite a multifaceted role you've got then, isn't it?
Indeed, it's very broad. Given Unity size, I've got the opportunity to be involved in a number of activities across finance. So it's a very exciting and interesting role.
Have you been here long?
I've just over a year now. So I've had a 20-year financial services background, so banking through and through.
Excellent. And Josh, what about you? How long have you been here for?
Well, I joined last year, towards the end of last year, as Head of Impact and Sustainability. So
very different roles you've got, the two of you here, haven't you? But I guess you work together quite a lot.
We do, particularly recently with the year-end report and also the annual impact report coming out as well. So we support one another a lot on how we make the financials in the bank work along with the impact we want to create.
And I know that on next month's show, you'll be in a position to tell us a lot more about the impact report, which is published later in March, isn't it? But how long does it take to put this together, and when do you start working on it, and what's the process?
Well, I think fortunately, impact runs through everything that we do at the bank. So throughout the year, all of our relationship managers are working with our customers to help deliver loans that they need to deliver the kind of social or environmental benefit that they want to achieve in their community. So towards the end of the year, along with Penny, we start working to understand what we've done throughout the year and being able to find the best way to report and share that with others. So it's a good thing to be able to work on, to look back on what we've delivered.
And customers and stakeholders want to know, don't they? They really, they look forward to sort of pouring through all the small print, don't they, on this report like this?
Yes, absolutely. Unity, the majority of our shareholders are also customers, so they are very, very interested in terms of the details of how Unity is performed. Of course, we have our double bottom line principles, so equally from a financial return perspective, but also for serving the common good in society as well.
How much has life changed in your industry, given what we've all been through in the last 3 or 4 years, in terms of the way you do your job, where you do your job, how you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So predominantly, from how we do our job and where we work, it's hybrid working at the moment, and that's where it worked really well for us because it gives the flexibility to employees, but whilst being able to engage from a business perspective, it's been really empowering. And it also gives an opportunity for Unity to consider a broader employee basis across the UK as well, to enable it to support onboarding talented individuals within the organisation.
And sustainability, Josh, that section of your job, that's risen up the agenda massively, hasn't it, in the last few years?
It has, yeah, and we're really proud this year that the first time we've published our carbon footprint in both the year-end report and our impact report. We'll talk more about that in the future. But sort of following the pandemic and the way we now work, we have to consider all the ways about how we are thinking about our carbon footprint, how we use remote working, and also how we as a bank can improve our own carbon footprint in the offices we're in and the way we work with our customers. So it's moving up the agenda, but we're really excited about how we can make that work with our social mission.
But it's the defining factor sometimes as to whether people will want to do business with you, isn't it?
I think it definitely is, particularly in my role. And I think for us, we're in a really unique position with the kind of shareholders and customer base we have, who also, they're looking to create benefits in their societies, and we all recognise that the potential risks of climate change for their customers, their communities, and for all those around them means we have to start working on this. And as a bank, we're really excited to be sort of taking our first steps in what we published on this year.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to chatting about all of this in a lot more detail with you on next month's show, where we can get stuck into the figures and find out what you've been up to. But thanks for the chat. See you again soon.
Thanks very much.
Great, thank you.
Well, that's almost it for another edition of Bbtv. I'm sure you'd agree we've covered a lot of ground today on this International Women's Day themed special here at the Unity Trust Bank. The set for the debate has now been vacated. The audience has left the building, Davis, but there's still one more job to do today, isn't there?
Absolutely, there's still one more job to do. We've got a special 90 seconds with, so you have to stick around to find out who that is with. But in the meantime, make sure that you check out Bbtv on all our social media platforms.
Absolutely, and don't forget, if there's something you think we should be talking about, send us a message if you'd like us to come and pay you a visit. If you're doing something wacky, crazy, interesting, controversial, we'd like to help to share your story. So please do get in touch with us through our website or on all our social channels. From all of us here, we'll say goodbye until next month, but we'll leave you with our 90 seconds with.
Birmingham's greatest asset?
That is a very good question. I think the people.
Your greatest strength in the workplace?
Building communities and helping people to thrive and flourish.
Your biggest weakness?
It's probably, I would definitely say it's a two-edged sword. I like to give my time, but time is something you can't get back.
The biggest decision you've ever made professionally?
Start my business.
Advice you would give to your younger self?
Just go for it, but do it a lot sooner.
Your proudest achievement at work?
Creating, I would say, a definite network of young people, entrepreneurs and leaders that inspire each other.
Your favourite place to unwind?
Anywhere where there's a glass of red wine.
Gym workout, stroll in the park or TV box set?
Stroll in the park.
Favourite meal?
Ooh. Anything to do with my heritage, my Caribbean heritage.
Your guiltiest pleasure?
Chocolate.
Dream holiday destination?
There's so many. I would probably say, I've been to Jamaica, I'd love to go back again.
Your dream dinner guest, dead or alive?
Barack Obama.
Favourite band or musician?
Favourite band was Nirvana, so anything to do with Nirvana.
Favourite personal possession?
I would say my relationships, but if you want an actual object, I would say me.